Okay, I am a reader, but I wasn't always a reader.
Okay.
Even though as a kid I liked comics and stuff like that, my name being Veronica, Archie, Betty, and Veronica, you know, those comics and X-Men comics. But I became a reader as an adult.
Okay.
And I say that because I read a whole lot more now. As a kid, I read because I had to, and read comics every now and then. So, having children, I love children's books. Those are my favorite.
Yes.
Adult books that I read are mostly about leadership, and I think my most favorite book of all time is the Bible.
Oh, you know
Every
what? I
single
have to stop
genre
you for a
is in
minute.
the
I have
Bible.
a student who also said his favorite book is the Bible.
Wow.
I think that's amazing. Yes.
Awesome.
Okay. And I wanted to talk to a bunch of different teachers about books that they like to read and why they think books are important. Are you currently reading anything interesting that you would like to share with us?
Well, I've read many books in the past, but currently I find myself reading more about newspapers.
Okay.
I like reading about current events, what's going on in our world today. Because it's important that since we live in this world, what's going on in our world too is what's very important.
So would you say you enjoy more nonfiction?
Yes,
than
I do.
fiction?
Yes,
Okay.
I do. And I like reading about, like I said, going with newspapers, true stories as well.
Okay. So have you read an interesting nonfiction book that you would like to share with us?
One book that I really enjoyed reading about a true story about a rugby team that crashed into the Andes in South America, and they had to fight for survival.
Oh, wow.
And it was definitely a tough test of humanity and morality and all that stuff, but it gives you an idea of what they went through, and I think that gives you a better perspective of what we go through in life.
Do you like to read?
I do like to read, but when I was younger, I did not like to read because I thought it was kind of boring.
Did you ever like to read?
At first I didn't because I didn't know how to, but then once I learned how to read, I enjoyed reading a lot when I was a kid. And then now as an adult, I teach kids how to read.
Do you like reading?
Yes, I do like reading.
Mom, do you like reading?
I do like reading.
Do you like reading?
Do I like reading? Yes, I love reading, but I didn't always love reading. When I was younger, I wasn't a big fan of reading, but now I enjoy it a lot more.
What do you like reading?
I like reading all kinds of books.
Do you like to read?
Yes.
Okay. Do you like to read?
I like to read when it's about a topic that I enjoy.
What topics do you enjoy?
Cooking, mystery, those kind of things.
Have you always been a reader? And if so, what intrigued you with reading?
As far as I can remember, I think it was second grade. My sister was my teacher, and she would read to us all the time. And I totally enjoy her reading to us, and so I used to pretend read.
Okay.
And then I start reading like in the last part of the year in second grade.
Okay.
I was a reader.
Okay.
Maybe a primer at the beginning, and then I just fell in love with reading. Growing up in the islands, you know, we didn't have the internet.
Okay.
So the only way you could know about things is by reading. So I used to
Okay.
read magazines and any kind of books. So that's how I started reading.
Mom, when did you start reading books?
I think I started reading books when I was in first grade.
Okay, how old were you when you started your fluency?
When I started reading fluently, I was probably your age, probably 7 or 8 when I started to read fluently.
Okay. What is your one of your favorite books?
This book, Horton Hears a Who, is one of my favorite books
Why is it your favorite book?
because it's got a great story, and Horton is so nice.
What was your favorite book when you were a kid?
I don't really remember what my favorite book was as a kid, but I know as I got older and I started reading some more, I found the Chris Van Allsburg books, you know, like Jumanji or Two Bad Ants, Polar Express. I loved all his books.
What's one of your favorite books?
Wonder.
Okay. What's Wonder about?
It's about a boy who when he was born, his face didn't look like everyone else's, so he was a little different, and it just talks about his story in his life.
Why is that your favorite book?
I like it because it's a real story. It's about a real person, and also I think it's neat that they made a movie about it.
And I know you love reading because you have a master's in reading specialist, and I just wanted to know, have you always been a reader? Like as a child growing up, were you always a reader?
Oh yeah, I was always a reader. I even memories right now, I can think of me just laying on the floor with my little bookcase next to me and pulling out every book and reading it. And then my mom always had this book of the month club. I would try to get 2 books every month, and so I'd always be excited when the mail would come and if it was my 2 new books and reading them. And I remember sometimes I'd get books and they were a little bit too tough for me and difficult, but I always thought, okay, I'm going to read this book, I'm going to learn. Eventually I'm going to be able to read every word in this book. And so I was determined to keep reading and practicing until I could read those books that at first when I got them, they were a little bit tough, but I kept on reading, and eventually that book became easy, and then I would go on to my next book. And so I remember reading a lot as a child.
Oh, that's cool. Is that one of the reasons why you decided to be like a reading specialist?
I think so, because I just love to read, and mostly I really love children's books.
Oh, cool. My favorite
And
book character is from a children's book.
Yeah, one of my all-time favorites when I was growing up was Wrinkle in Time. And then I was so excited when the movie came out because it was one of my favorite books.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's one of your favorite books?
The Secret Keeper by Kate Morton.
I think what you just said, I think that's really interesting. Why is it your favorite book?
It's based in London around the World War II era, and the characters in the beginning of the story have a good twist at the very end of the story.
Me too. What's one of your favorite books?
One of my favorite books is called Little Women. I love that book because it shows you the lives of a bunch of sisters and how they sometimes get along and sometimes don't get along, and it takes you through their life from the very beginning together to all the different things that they end up doing in life.
What's one of your favorite book?
I would say The Cosmos by Carl Sagan.
Why is that your favorite book?
It's my favorite book because Carl Sagan really does a good job at explaining the way the universe works and makes you realize how big the universe really is and how small we really are.
Why is your favorite book your favorite?
Because it keeps me entertained the entire time.
So as a reader, do you have different genres of books that you just love to read? And if so, did it change as you became an adult?
You know, it's interesting that you asked. I like historical fiction, and I'm not I don't really care for fiction.
Okay.
I like nonfiction, and I really, as a kid, never watched cartoons.
Okay.
Because it to me wasn't real.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've always loved historical fiction or historical nonfiction, because it gives you the background of history, and so you can then use that text as learning history. So that's why I like that.
So do you find being in education that you read more adult books, or do you kind of like children's books?
No way. I read young adult books, fantasy, sci-fi, usually technology related.
Oh wow!
But a lot of fun, like creatures and magic.
Nice. So we were looking at the different genres of reading or writing, and the students were introduced to science fiction. And one of the key words that was mentioned was sci-fi, and it talked about how if you like aliens and things like that, then you might enjoy sci-fi. Oh wow.
Question number 2. Do you think reading is important?
I do think it's important because it helps stretch your imagination and you learn new words and it just exercises your mind.
Do you think reading is important? Why or why not?
I think reading is very important because it helps your brain learn new words and it helps it expand even bigger and helps build your imagination.
it's very important to read, and I think it's important because it teaches you about things that you might not get to see in your lifetime, so you can read about it. Plus, it gives you a better understanding of where other people come from or what other people's viewpoints are, and it helps you make better decisions and become more worldly.
And so learning how to read is very important, because if not, then there's a lot of things in life that we'll miss because we have to read it. And if we don't know how to read, we can't do it.
Do you think reading is important?
Yes, I think reading is very important.
Okay. Why?
Well, if you didn't know how to read, it would be really hard to drive a car, because you have to know how to drive, like read the street signs when you're driving. And cooking would be very difficult because you wouldn't be able to follow the directions. So reading is very important. And they say the more you read, the more you know.
Do you think reading is important?
I do. I think it's important because it helps you with language skills, and it helps keep your brain functioning for years to come. Keeps you going.
Yes, reading's pretty important.
Why?
Why? Because you can learn stuff, and even if you don't have somebody there to teach you, you can read a book or something that tells you how to do something, and you can learn all by yourself.
Okay. Why do you think reading is important?
Reading is important because it opens your mind, it expands your vocabulary. When you're reading, you see words that you've never seen before. If you see the word that you don't know what it means, it makes you go look it up so you understand the story. So I think reading is very important.
Do you think reading is important?
It's very important. One of the most important things for kids to do.
Why not?
Why? Because it helps your brain grow. It helps you learn new words and learn about new places and new people.
My favorite book is Beauty and the Beast.
Do they really have a book of that?
They do.
Oh my gosh. Can you show me after the video to prove it to me?
Sure.